Financial management. Oh my goodness. Financial management is not just a budget, is it?
No.
I wish it was, it'd be so much easier.
Yeah.
Money would appear out of the air and you could just spend it however way you liked, right?
Oh, like Congress does.
This is not the federal government. We can't print more money. We would.
I don't work either.
So, any ideas what financial management really is? Any ideas out there? Making your money work for you. You include budgets?
Yes. Fiduciary responsibility.
Fiduciary.
Knowing where your money's coming from and where it's going.
That actually covers a lot of the terms all in one term. Accounting and finance reporting.
Yeah.
How many times a year do you have to do that?
Every time. Once a
A
month.
minimum of actually twice. You have to report to the federal government, and what do you have to report to the lodge? And actually, I guess you could say it 3 times. You have to report it to the lodge, and you have to report it to Grand Lodge. You have an audit required by code, right? And then you better send it in a 1099, or guess what? You won't be nonprofit for very long. Not always, but sometimes, depending on your qualification. Right? Budgeting. Auditing's on there twice. Accounting and financial reporting. Generating revenue. That's making money. That last one, risk management. Why is that under financial management?
Investment money could lose. You take a risk when you invest.
Investing bad investments,
Or accepting 0.04%.
or someone falling down the stairs in your lodge and not having insurance.
Yeah.
Ouch. Right?
Unauthorized borrowing.
Yeah. Unauthorized bottling, illegal things happening in your lodge.
Not transferring all of your real property to the temple.
Insurance for lodge officers and temple board. Okay, accounting and financial reporting. This includes collecting and organizing data. That means what you spent last year and how much did you actually earn. Has anybody ever had a problem getting this? Sometimes guys just don't want to give up that information, but you as a worshipful master are making decisions, right? Do you think you need to know what you actually have for income? Do you want to, how many people think it's good to go ahead and spend capital?
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Right? You don't want to spend your money that you invested, you want to spend
Money you
interest,
earn.
the money you earned, right? You don't want to cut into how you're earning money.
This one's been hurt on me.
Yes, there you go. Accurate records. So, are accurate records kept in a shoebox?
Can they?
They could be, although I will tell you your accountant will hate you. There are so many things out there you guys can use to keep records, Excel. There's actually accounting software you can use. You can use a ledger book. As long as you're keeping accurate account. What's the treasurer supposed to do?
Keep a just and accurate account thereof.
Thereof, there you go. Just an accurate account of the same. Take charge of all the stocks and properties of the law.
That is a trade basket.
That is a big basket. So paper ledgers, Excel spreadsheet, programs like Quicken, QuickBooks if you're really into the money thing. Reconciliation of bank accounts. So if you look at the Grand Lodge Audit Committee things, the little guidance they give you on how to audit the Grand Lodge, audit your stuff, it says, does the bank account say what your ledger says?
every week.
Every week it says it.
Now, the reason I say that is because as treasurer, I do it every week because I do online banking and I make sure my books balanced it every week.
But it doesn't always happen that way. That's scary.
Remember that hangs onto a check for months and months?
Well, if somebody's hanging on to a check, I let them know that that document's only good for 6 months, and after that, the bank will not honor it.
Yeah. And then you also need to contact the bank to make sure that they don't honor it, because they will honor a check that's older than 6 months. Even though you tell them, unless you tell them specifically, don't do it.
To go back to the first part, you said, what rules we're talking about an audit?
There's actually, you can go to the Grand Lodge website, and they
Yeah.
give information on how to do a lodge audit.
Oh, it's just best practices kind
Little
of thing?
forms, exactly what to check, and go down, nice little checklist.
Okay.
Really nice to use. On the Grand Lodge website, right? Organize a calendar with key days to report to your lodge, RS, and Grand Lodge. So remember I said you have to report to the Grand Lodge when your audit's complete? And now the treasurer's on the hook to do the 1099s and make sure those are done. Now this key here is, notice I said IRS in Grand Lodge. Those may be different dates.
I will say this, the most important one there is the IRS. You know, you can talk to Grand Lodge and they will be reasonable, they're all brothers, except for the ladies working for them. But the IRS, you get them on your tail, it takes a bloody long time to get that one straight.
Yeah. If you lose your nonprofit, it could take up to 3 or more years to get it back.
But here's the other thing, if the IRS sends you a letter, within 3 days, send them a letter back saying that you received their letter and you're looking into what their questions are. Do not forget to communicate with the IRS within 3 days. It will make your life much nicer than if you wait.
And the IRS never makes a mistake.
You're damn right.
You don't believe me, just ask them.
Yeah.
Oh, and I speak from experience on that 3-day thing. Really, I do. Out of state, but I speak from experience.
A really thing is make sure that those dates go on your calendar as a worshipful master, because guess who's responsible for it? That's right. You're ultimately responsible for everything that happens in your lodge. So if you fail to put in your annual report on time, you can be fined up to, was it $5 for every day now after it's due? And you could lose your charter up to the Grand Master's discretion. Mr. Swasey here has been on the bad report one time. Never again.
Some of us require a little slap in the hand to learn. Some of us
Well,
don't.
sometimes your priorities are a little bit different.
Yeah.
The problem I said is, well, let me go back. Is there a back button there? Sorry. Previous, right? Reason why I said IRS, because your IRS date might be different than what Grand Lodge thinks it is. Because it goes on based on the fiscal year of your organization. You have 3 months after your fiscal year ends for that organization to have your IRS return in. Now, some lodges have turned in their forms in June. So now the IRS thinks that's 3 months after your fiscal year is done. They won't accept you to turn in your forms early. They'll count back to 3 months and they won't accept that paperwork to tell them. But Grand Lodge is expected to see it by the end of January or into February. You're like, I can't turn it in. Right? Or as we found out in our case, our accountant had been filing extensions and sending them in September. So we have new accountants now. He filed these extensions, turned in September. Well, IRS had finally said, okay, and your fiscal year must be in June. So they won't accept our stuff, so we keep getting the little bad notice from Grand Lodge. Which is where it took us a while to get that fixed, and it wasn't really a fun fix. Hence why Mr. Swasey got the master grant from the Grand Master, which was not fun.
Could I add something? This morning I went to an event and they have a Grand Lodge key events list. So
Really?
here they have all the key dates that you have to,
How about that?
yeah.
It's also on their webpage, I believe.
They say the communications in April, whatever is in June.
Yeah, communications is in June.
Yeah, but there it says April.
Okay, how do you put a budget together? Well, the big one is you pull all the financial records from the previous year. Now, if you happen to have one of the nice little Quicken programs, or your Excel, or your treasurer's really squared away and it's got it all documented out on, this is how much we spent on stamps and postage, and this is how much we spent on community events, and this is how much we spent on meals last year. It allows you to put together a budget a lot easier. Hence the reason why recording and documenting stuff and going over your previous year's spending. Income versus expense. Why do you need to know income?
So you know how much you can be.
Exactly.
Do they know how much you can spend?
What are the types of income? Dues, fundraisers, donations, investments, Grand Lodge Life membership, which is really an investment, net operating income from property. Why is that on the lodge budget? We're going to get to that. Okay. No, we're going to get to that portion. So these are just some of them. There's other ways you can get budgeting, or other ways you can get funds. Expenses, your biggest one. Grand Lodge per capita. Most likely, what is it, 22 a month or 22 a person this year?
23.
23. We got 23 and it's going up to
25.
25. Right? D&O insurance, that's directors and officers insurance. Lodge operations, that's your steward's fund. Communications, how much it costs to send a trestle board. Sometimes secretaries or treasurers have stipends. All right? Something comes along with a stipend is, guess what? Another IRS report you gotta send in. Right? Donations to other, these are your nonprofit donations to other organizations. Education, buying books. Those books don't come for free to the lodge. What else? What about this stuff you wear in lodge? Does it wear out?
Apparently not.
Yeah, apparently not, right? Those apron thingies that you wear in lodge, all that stuff, that's lodge.
Sooner or later, you need to replace one or more.
One or more. All right. Temple Board Reserve Fund, we're gonna get to that a little bit later too. The Temple Board. This is what the Temple Board really is. It is not the silent, hidden behind the scenes ruling class of the lodge. It is a property management for the lodge's real assets. That means trailers and trucks. Never thought about that. Trailers and trucks till we bought a trailer for our music in the park, and guess what? That's property. Lodge can't own it. Right? You got your property, your land that you're living on. That's real property.
Lodge can't own that either.
Lodge can't own that. That becomes a temple board.
Is that because of the Masonic Code?
That's Masonic code. It's also a way to, it's a mechanism to insulate the lodge's money and Grand Lodge's money from mistakes that happen on the property itself. Yes.
As I said in Lodge, and I gave a little short spiel about temple boards. And I said, what is the lodge? The lodge is the members of the lodge, and if the lodge gets sued, so does every member in the lodge get sued. And that's why you don't want to own real property in the lodge. You want the temple board to own real property. That's the lesson.
If someone trips and falls down the stairs, guess what? They may get your building, but they don't get everything else in everybody's pocket as well.
They don't get your house is what they don't get.
Yeah.
Unless you're not a temple board.
Cash and liquid investment assets stay with the lodge. So rental income goes where? It goes to the temple board, and then where does it go?
Lodge.
Not always.
Well, so
Above operating
the
costs.
temple board, the building corporation needs to keep a reasonable amount, ought to keep a reasonable amount. And once they've reached that reasonable amount, and by IRS rules, and that reasonable amount is not defined necessarily.
Yeah, it's not defined. The rest of it goes-
The rest of it has to be given, because if the temple board keeps too much, then you can raise other questions and issues that have tax issues and also potential liability issues. Now,
Exactly.
I have actually started a conversation with a local BOMA member, which is the Building and Owners and Maintenance Association, and to maybe perhaps come across some an outlet from a third-party source that is prudent and reasonable for how much, depending on, you know, the age of the building, the age of the structures, like how old's your furnace, how old's this, how much should you keep in reserve, and then so that it's not random and just made up, but it's like.
Yeah, you have a
collected from
definite formula of how you came up with that money.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to
I do.
ask me, look
I'm
at
asking. I'm
Okay.
Scott.
I'm
I'm
Scott as
asking
well.
so nice. All right.
This, the key
We
thing
can
here
talk
is
about that
that,
in a bit. I don't want to take his class away from him because
here we go.
it's a lot more than.
temple board maintains only an operational fund. That's enough money to make emergency repairs, right? But if,
repairs.
but if the roof falls in, guess where they gotta get the money from?
Insurance.
The broke lodge.
Well, hopefully the lodge isn't broke, because if they're doing their job and being a business management, then they're gonna earn your lodge money. All right, hopefully. That's not necessarily true, but the only way they're gonna get their money is from lodge or asking Grand Lodge for a loan, right?
So I'm not sure that makes any sense, though. I would never ask my tenants of my rental unit to get money to my roof,
Yeah, well.
because I own the building. So it's
But they own your corporation. That's the sticker in the whole
That's the
problem.
kicker, the lodge
They
owns the corporation.
Okay, yeah, but you're shifting terms at that point. I'm not, at that point, you're all mixing in one, there's no separation.
But you have
No,
your
that's
tenants
not true.
pay
There is.
per capita square footage of your building insurance.
What's that?
You have your tenants pay a percentage based on their square footage that they're renting from you.
Yeah.
I want to give you a little brief history on that, because what happened is, before we went to this idea, before you started building that separation in, they actually had an incident where someone found some leaky oil tanks on some property that a lodge had bought, and they got sued. So this is where the lawyers came in and said, this is exactly how you need to form this, and they codified this in our Masonic code, which is the reason why we're doing it the way we do it.
How long ago?
Less than 10 years. Less than 10 years.
Question on
Corporate
this.
shield to keep the members of the lodge from getting sued.
Yeah. So temple board specifically is a business. And key thing is, it's tempered by tenets and Masonic institution, right? We have our Masonic principles.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you give away property to a brother just because it's the, you know, on the cheap, right? It's a business, earning money for the lodge, yes.
Question, is there any way, say somebody wanted to, had a lot of money, wanted to contribute money to the lodge to establish a fund that will cover those expenses? You can't do it with a temple board because the lodge, can it be set up within the lodge?
Establish a fund through the lodge for building maintenance specifically.
Yeah, it has to be through the lodge though.
And that would usually, if you're smart, you would go through the Grand Lodge
Yeah.
using their nonprofit shield.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I
That's the way
understand
you end
that,
up doing
but
it.
it can be done,
I would see places like Planned Giving,
yeah.
the committee for that.
Just wondering.
So if your lodge doesn't own real property, do you have a temple board?
You can.
Yes.
If
Yes,
you don't own any real property,
it belongs to the lodge, you just sold real property. That's still, that fund is still being maintained by the temple board. Collecting it, because we mortgaged it, we carry the mortgage ourselves. We still have a temple board handling those funds.
Okay, so you still technically own the mortgage then?
Yeah, we own the mortgage. The lodge owns the mortgage.
Without owning any property at all, you can have a temple board because you have the temple board out investigating, looking to purchase.
Then you don't have a temple board, you have a group of brothers that are on a committee looking for new property.
Yes, but
You have a committee that is assigned to keep track of those assets.
You don't need a legal.
But by Washington Masonic Code, you do not have a temple board.
that's right, you have to own property.
You have to have real property in order to have the LLC.
Yeah.
So then you need to dissolve, to go to anybody who doesn't have a land or property
Yeah.
and say, do you have a temple board? Yeah. It's like, all right, you're in violation. Ha! Gotcha.
Yeah. Well, that's what the Grand Master, that's him and this, that's what those guys do, yes.
You said that your lodge bought the trailer for the concerts in the park. The lodge owns that trailer? You said
Nope,
that
temple
the
board
temple
owns it.
board does. Can a lodge own a trailer?
Nope.
I mean, is that bad?
You don't want
That's
that.
not real property though, right?
Yes, so the temple is registered
not-
under the
it's
temple
not-
It's
board.
not real
real
property,
estate.
it's personal property,
Personal property.
but it's property.
It's
You
real
don't
property.
want-
It's not real.
The trailer causes someone to lose a leg, you don't want that lodge to be owning it because we're all the lodge, and then you go
Right,
to
right.
Unfortunately.
individually.
So the way this works is the temple board insures the trailer, and guess what?
Move it, but we will.
If it gets in an accident, someone runs over, the trailer breaks the wheel and flies off, they can sue the temple board.
Helps.
Then you gotta say, don't own real or personal property.
That's what it should be.
I disagree with you.
The assets
You
stay,
still have your jewels.
Hired to have a house.
Yeah.
well, that's personal.
It's contract.
So,
Put a-
Temple board budgeting. Income is rents, royalties, leases from tenants, and usage fees.
He can't get mortgage.
Initial funding comes from the lodge.
Well, all additional funding, because you can't run a business and make profit, right?
So,
You talk about group.
we'll get to this, it's kind of a wacky thing, but you'll see what I'm talking about here. At the beginning of the year, the lodge says, okay, I'm gonna budget the temple board 10 grand to run its business for the year.
Get a mortgage for the price.
That fronts them the money up front.
Way to the house.
You can do that.
We had an attorney in our lodge explain that we could not do temple board business during lodge to perform that action, or we could be held liable.
That's
should
not temple
some
board
action-
business. That's the lodge allocating money to the temple
What he
board.
said has happened in the past is the other people's attorney will look for any action in the lodge such as that, and they will use that as discovery in court to bring the action.
If temple board is doing their budgeting in lodge, yes.
Yeah, they're not doing their budgeting. The lodge is doing its
He
budget
said
saying,
any temple board business whatsoever.
it's not temple board business. This is the
So it's
lodge.
lodge business.
Yes, but he
Giving
said
money.
the court doesn't necessarily see the distinction as we do. Therefore, we have to be very careful and discriminate.
That's
not to conduct
true.
Any temple board business whatsoever. However, we could go off session and have a temple board meeting separate from the lodge. Go back on session and continue with our lodge business. He was very clear and very adamant about it.
Yes, like you can't talk about how we're gonna replace our washers and dryers in lodge. You can't talk about, we need to remodel in lodge. You can ask the lodge for funds to do a remodel. We have a plan done. If you'd like to review the plan, please come to the temple board meeting. But next month, we would like to, start this if we get the funding from lodge. That's like you're donating money to the temple board in order to do its operations, or donating money to the temple board to do building improvements. That's what you're doing. And that's the only thing you can actually do in lodge when it comes to the temple board. Because that and voting, balloting new members into the lodge as per Masonic code, or into the temple board, yes.
So the lodge has to donate the money in session because it's the lodge's money.
That's right. That's where that comes in. So you're basically saying, this is what you have to operate on for the next year. That's that initial fund you were talking about, how much you have to start with. This is what you have. You can't keep any more than that on hand, otherwise you have to give it back to the lodge. So, notice the temple board. Can the temple board do fundraisers? No. The answer is no. No fundraisers for temple board. Lodge does fundraisers, but temple board can't do fundraisers.
It's an LLC.
Rents and royalties are not fundraisers.
Nope, that's income. They're charging rent, they have a contract.
Roger that.
Fundraiser would be like bake
I
sale.
know. I know.
If you do a fundraiser, you're violating IRS code.
That and the RCW.
Yeah. Okay, so lodges can have fundraisers to fund temple board capital improvements and repairs. Like you can have a giant fundraiser to get your money to replace the roof.
That's a contradiction from the previous screen.
No, lodge can do it.
Oh, okay. Lodge can do
Lodge can do it, the temple board cannot. Temple board expenses, utilities, maintenance, repairs, taxes, insurance, property insurance, D&O insurance, vehicles, trailers, floats. Grand Lodge has a corporation too. Guess what? They used to own a float. Now they own property. We used to rent. Yes?
So if somebody says to the lodge, here's a trailer, I'm gonna donate it to you for whatever, the lodge will give it to the temple board?
Yep. Temple board to go ahead and do all the registration it needed to. If you can. Yes?
Say you have a temple board that represents 2 lodges, and somebody donates something to one of the lodges, therefore it must be donated to both lodges?
I'm not sure. You'll have to.
Management companies can deal with more than one entity, right?
Yeah.
Management company can have 15 clients that all have different rentals.
Exactly.
So they can be separate.
Okay.
They're basically a property management company, that's what they do. So, you can even designate, you could give it to them and say, okay, you need to go ahead and manage this property for me, but only we can use it. Because they do that all the time. Apartment complexes are managed by multiple large organizations. Right. So at the beginning of the year, Temple Board presents the lodge with a budget. This is what we plan on spending for the year. The lodge funds the Temple Board. Here's your money for the year. I don't see nothing back from you, right? Or if I see something back, it better be over that amount. At the end of the year, Temple Board transfers the net operating income, rental income after expenses, back to the lodge. It's basically handing a check to say, here, you start the year, or it's a paper trail. I'm showing that I'm giving you this money to start your operations for the year. You're giving me all the money left over. In reality, does that happen? No. What really happens is they keep the money they need to start the year and just hand you the excess. But you want to have that paper trail in your records, so when they come
Through
looking.
the budget.
Through the budget, yes. And the circle continues.
So are you still going to touch about the excess funds?
Yeah. Well, that's where, let me go back. Previous. Maybe. Temple Board transferred net operating income, rental income after expenses. All that excess comes back to the lodge. So anytime they go over that reserve amount, it comes back to the lodge.
Okay, so you can't have expenses that would have a reserve amount.
Yes.
But Scott thinks it can be a sizable amount based on like kind and quality of needs for your continuing.
Yeah, like replacement of furnace or something like that. You know it's coming up, you put it in your budget to begin with. If not, sometimes it's not budgeted.
But it's not an expense at that point,
Yeah.
right?
No, not until you actually spend the money.
So what do you do with that money, right? So we know we're gonna need another furnace down the road. It's gonna cost 10 grand. We need to have that aside. Does that money set aside in the Temple Board, or should that set aside earmarked in the lodge?
You can ask the lodge to set it aside. They set it aside. It doesn't become part of the budget at all.
Wouldn't it not be best to have a separate account set aside for the building fund or maintenance?
That is up to the lodge, and I'll be honest, in your long-range planning, you know your building's gonna wear out. But remember, once you set aside money into a building fund, can you touch it for anything but the building?
Well, you're better off calling it a reserve fund, and the reserve fund needs to be amount is reasonable and customary for whatever your building is. You don't want it to become too much money because if it's too much
I
money.
understand. What I put on the bank account would be one thing, what I call it lodge may be something else. So that the brethren understand what, this is what for.
On paper, you might want to write that down, but if you, once you create a fund for building funds, this just becomes like a scholarship fund. Once you decide to call it that, in legal terms, you can't spend it for anything but that.
Your
But I-
safest
but
thing, your
my-
safest thing to do is to refer to it as a reserve fund, building reserve fund.
I put that as building reserve fund on the document at the bank. What I call it in lodge, so to keep the brethren up to speed for what it's for, I can use other terms to re-explain what the building reserve fund is.
I wouldn't.
You can use, you can say what's coming up to justify it, right?
Yeah.
The reason we have the reserve fund is because we've got this coming up, the expected lifespan of the roof is 20 years, it's 25 years old. But they,
How do you know that?
but the roofing contractor said we might get another 5 years out of it, so
Yeah.
blah, 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 whatever it is.
Yeah, but rather than keeping it in the Temple Corporation, we have to keep it in the lodge.
Yes, because it is a liquid asset at that time. Well, you have a fund for operating and your normal repairs, but that's up to the temple board to tell that what that is in your budget.
Near and short term and midterm.
Yeah, but your long-term stuff stays in the lodge.
It's only short and midterm,
I think that's what's been considered prudent. That's my understanding.
and midterm is,
Replacing the roof in 3 to 5 years.
Question?
Yeah, I was curious, like with the Masonic home, when they disillusioned that, was there a building fund set up for that, or like a trust fund, or for a
They
maintenance?
actually had their own committee. They had their own corporation for that stuff.
Based on.
What happened to the money now?
I'm not the right person to ask that question for. I don't.
We got the letter, it says they sold it, so.
They sold it, probably absorbed it back into the Grand Lodge General Fund or under the fund for their nonprofit organization. I
So
would
they're
have
just
to.
gonna blow it?
No.
I hope the hell not.
All right. The temple board is accountable to the lodge for the running of the business.
Oh, yes, we are.
Yes, they are. So guess what? The temple board has to do an audit too. They get sent in with Grand Lodge and get sent to the lodge too.
Yes, we do.
Section 1408 deals with the end of year return. When they're due, section 1411 audit committee. Grand Lodge does provide auditing to them. Financing committees. Now, my bylaws of my lodge says the finance committee consists of the junior and senior warden and the worshipful master for the approval of all bills. Is that really a finance committee? No. No, that's a bill approval committee. That's one that's saying, yes, the bills those are valid and should be paid in lodge, right? If they're part of the budget, you know, the budget of a lot of members. That's not really a financing committee. The finance committee should be, who handles your investments? Well, they're responsible to the treasurer, but, you know, do you want to have a growth plan? Do you want to earn some interest, you know? Stick it all in CDs, or you're
For the
gonna
next
put it?
20 years, do I put my money in CDs or do I put it in 30-year bonds?
Yeah, you know, it's kind of prudent to say, let's have some people that are knowledgeable in this and more than one set of eyes on it. Right? Because it really does help. And the treasurer is overall responsible because what does he do? Take charge of all the stocks and properties of the lodge. Right? So guess what? He's automatically the chairman of that committee, or should be. If he isn't, then you need to go back and look at your code again. Because you want to plan and grow money, financial assets and resources, right? Generate revenue. Nonprofit does not mean no money. Right? So many people are afraid that we'll have to pay taxes. Well, if you earn lots of money, it's okay to pay taxes because you're earning money. I would rather pay taxes and have a lot of money in my coffers to be able to spend on nonprofit stuff.
Well, that's what I said, depends on what you spend what the profits, what you spend the profits on in your nonprofit. You start spending on things to accumulate your own wealth, then you might trouble the IRS. If you're giving it away,
Yeah. You cannot rely on dues alone, because guess what? How many people, what do you dues in some of your lodges just out there? Mine at $50
plus,
a year. Can you believe that?
plus the head tax. And
30, couple hundred, couple hundred, right? But do all your dues cover your per capita and operating expenses every year?
No?
No, so you can't just rely on dues. So you want to make sure, so when you're doing your planning, you want to make sure your lodge is around for how many more years?
N plus one.
I said 300 years.
N plus one.
N plus one, there you go.
N plus one.
I understand that.
N is any number you want to pick, plus one more.
Right?
Can't say forever, you can't say infinity.
So, dues, fundraisers, donations, investments, Grand Lodge, life memberships, net operating income for property. Investment policy is designed to fund the lodge. Now, this is what my lodge does. Our investment, our portfolio, is designed specifically to fund lodge operations. So we don't spend capital. We want to build our stuff, so the only thing we're doing is paying. We're operating off our income, and we're building capital the whole time.
Are you planning, do you have property?
Now, our lodge has no property, the temple does.
Well,
But yes, we do get rental income
so do you have,
from the temple board.
are you using, do you have a fund then for the maintenance?
Yes.
That's separate then?
That
So
goes
you
back
still
to
throw some money in there so that it's always kind of sitting at some amount?
It's not designated specifically that, but we keep track of it that way. You know what I'm saying? It's just a separate line item that we keep building. We add this money into this line item every year. It's not designated as a fund because it becomes not very liquid after that.
Do you have a temple board that owns the building where your lodge meets? Does the temple board charge your lodge to meet there?
Yes, it does. It charges everybody that meets there.
called rent.
We do. Now, part of the cool thing is, though, is it allows your lodge to do some pretty nice things too, like, oh, let's make sure that we donate to the Rainbow Girls enough money to cover all their rental for the year. That counts as nonprofit spending, you know. So those are some of the things there. Temple board budgeting, income. Remember, temple boards cannot do fundraisers. You will be in big trouble for that. Don't do it. Yes?
Big trouble with Grand Lodge or IRS, or should I just accept big trouble?
Big trouble from all of the above.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's a class 101 on how to lose your LLC.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes?
Going back to the temple board, the lodge is paying physical money to the temple board?
Yes.
So we don't do that, because the IRS says you don't have to if you're a title holding company, which is the temple board is, because they're getting the value anyway without.
I understand, to maintain it. We do it to make sure we have that paper, it's a trail. Just an idea, yes.
The Temple Corporation also pays the taxes, the electric bill, and if they don't get the money, how do they do that?
That's through
Well,
the
the temple board
budget,
pays those bills.
appropriated by
So
the
if you
law.
have rental income,
From
it's all
the
it
law.
goes to the
They
temple.
pay it out of there, but there's a little paper trail thing that says, yes, we paid you all that money back, and now you're gonna give us stuff to start with, although the money may not actually ever move,
Correct.
you know,
You're not writing them a check.
you may or may not.
No.
Risk management. This is an important part here that a lot of people forget about. I fall off the cliff, yeah? What is risk management at the lodge? Wow, there's a lot of stuff here. Setting clear expectations for your officers and brothers. Okay, so when you get money, $300 to go buy bikes for books, treasurer just gives you a check for $300. Here you go, bikes for books, go buy the bikes. What's wrong with that picture?
There's no way to know whether or not you ever bought the bikes.
Yeah, so he comes back with two $25 bikes. And takes out his brand new shotgun out to the right shotgun. No. As the treasurer so eloquently stated, guess what? The chairman of that committee has to furnish a receipt back showing how much he actually spent, whatever money is left over
Gets returned.
is returned. Now, what we've always found out, to be honest, with our members,
Yeah.
they get $300 for bikes and books. They'll go find their best thing out there, and well, we could get one more bike, but it's gonna cost me $10 over the limit. He'll cough up that $10. Because that's what brothers do, yes.
Yes, but the chairman of the Bikes for Books, we checked with the school how many we're going to give. He prices those out. He knows within about $1.298
Yeah.
exactly what that's going to cost, and that's the budget he gets to go spend it.
But he knows, and like I said, the receipt has to come back because you have to have a paper trail for every dollar spent.
Else the bean counter gets upset.
Yes, treasurer gets upset, secretary usually really gets upset because you messed up all his paperwork.
Yeah.
Written policies and procedures, this is the biggest one where we're weak on in Masonic. Written policies and procedures. How do we, I don't think, do you have a written policy for your
Yes.
investments?
Yes?
Yeah.
Well, what about just a good old fashioned, a rental agreement? And I kid you not, this goes back to the
True.
whole, conflict resolution. I'm like, look, this is a LLC or a corporation, and you're telling me the corporation doesn't have a written, release?
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's done with a handshake. And I'm like, you know what, that's wrong. How do I say to the brother, look, that's frickin' stupid?
Well, you don't say it that way.
I know, and how do I do it? Because it's like,
Stop doing pejorative terms,
I
you need
know.
to go.
I'm asking.
So, notice how I have, this is for the lodge itself. Notice how I have written investment policies? Because they're investors, not traders, right? Not T-R-A-T, traders, right? Lodge bylaws, some lodge bylaws specifically state how much of the investment income can be spent for certain things. I have seen lodge bylaws like that. They say only so much of your money can be spent, like 15% of your interest income can be spent on lodge operations. That's a little binding for me unless you're getting a whole lot of money. If you happen to be St. John's, well, that's cool. But if you're like us, that's ouch, right?
Our lodge has that policy, but we can spend 30%, but that's to help our money grow faster.
Yeah. So, legal and accounting tax resources. Directors and officers insurance. Why should the worshipful master and the treasurer and the junior and senior wardens have insurance?
You're talking about bonds?
If you're spending the lodge's money,
They should be bonded.
you need to have some insurance.
That's what the bond is, right? The bond.
It's really not that bad. I think ours is $600 a year,
There's a difference.
which is a guy.
That's a little low.
They are insured against anything that's going to
Grand Lodge has
Brothers,
a
one of my brothers put it together for
bond.
Grand Lodge.
Just means you've got so much money set aside. to the state.
Check it out. Remember we were talking about that? Reserve fund for building. Stuff wears out. Temple board. First one there, proper selection process for temple board officers. I gotta kind of go fast because my time's running out. He keeps running by flashing numbers at me. All right, how do you become a temple board officer? Or become on the temple board, period?
Elected by the lodge or appointed by the.
Exactly. You are elected by the lodge. You can be appointed to fill out a term on the worshipful master until the next election comes up
With the consent of the lodge.
with the consent of the lodge. So you can make an appointment and if the lodge, and do a by hand vote on that one guy until the end of that term or the next election comes up. That's Masonic code. Now, how do they select their officers?
Temple Corporation elects their own officers.
Yes, at their own stakeholders meeting, which everybody in the lodge may attend.
Oh,
They
but they
can't-
can't be at their annual meeting.
Annual
Ours is in
principal
December.
of the lodge.
What?
They can't be a principal officer.
And they cannot be a principal officer of the lodge as per Masonic code. Temple board bylaws, they make sure that they understand their own temple board bylaws.
Does that include finding them?
Yeah. If you have issues and you're a worshipful master at that point, you can actually go to Grand Lodge and they have copies of those that they will furnish you.
Really?
Yes, they will. Because all those have to be approved and maintain a copy at Grand Lodge.
Just like the lodge bylaws.
Yep. And notice I have directors and officers insurance and building insurance down there at the end. Now, if you have a trailer, what kind of insurance should you have too?
Comprehensive and liability.
Yeah, it needs to be added on. Most of that can be added on to your building insurance. It covers all insurance.
Question after you say for bid, what is there a minimum amount you have to have a bid for? If the money's below a certain amount, can you do it without a bid?
No, what I'm saying is multiple bids for a project. There's no real minimum amount, although Masonic Code says that you can't spend more than, does anybody know the number? Without getting permission from Grand Lodge?
25,000.
25,000.
So basically they say you have to have 25,000 over project, you're gonna have to take a bid.
No, if you have a project cost 25, like we had $100,000 to place a road.
That's if you're borrowing the money.
No,
That's if you're doing a project of the value and spending your own money.
we had 100 grand easy to spend on our road, no problem. But we had to get permission from Grand Lodge in order to go through with that purchase as per Masonic Code. Because what happens is lodges will spend their last $100,000 on the lodge roof and have nothing to continue on with the lodge. They're saying, hey, maybe you need to find a different way to do that. You can borrow money from Grand Lodge, but that's a whole different process.
I would say that almost any job at any scope, you should get 3 bids. You know, I mean, if it's
But that's up to your
it's-
temple board to make that.
It's $50, $100, but you know. But
That's up to the temple board to go ahead and come up with those numbers.
yeah.
So the big one is the lodge and temple board both have insurance. The difference between the temple board, they have building insurance, which includes all of its property. Yeah, question situation, we really don't have time for it right now. So, a lot of questions on here. The biggest thing to remember is there's a separation between the temple board and lodge. They talked about not talking about temple board issues, which is specifically, things like, I would like to put a certain type of roof on the lodge, right? Not whether we need $100,000 for the repair of the lodge. You can ask the lodge, we need $100,000 for the lodge.